Hey, congratulations. I'm here, Mr. Robinson. Look, going to go through a few. Now, look, I just want to explain. This is not typically how I dress for schoolwork, wearing the Tom Cruise shirt. Tom Cruise is I'm a fan, huge fan of his. But since there are no students around, hey, I just figured I'd wear a Top Gun shirt because hey, I'm the Top Gun. This class, we're the Top Gun in this class. So, anyways, I'm getting to the beginning of the rebellion here. The rebellion meaning the American Revolution, the War for Independence, all of that. This is the title of the PowerPoint is called "The Stirrings of Rebellion," and we're going to look at things that the British did, specific actions which inflamed that resentment towards Great Britain. All right, it enhanced the movement towards rebellion, and ultimately it's going to lead to a long war. All right, of about 6, 7 years. All right, so this is the beginning of it, though. This is the things that the British did that started it. Now, if you remember from yesterday when I went over that French and Indian War, that war put the British into debt. So what does governments have to do to get out of debt? They got to find a way to raise money. How does government get its money? Through taxes. So that's what the British did to the colonies. All right, they started taxing the colonists. So the stirrings of rebellion. First thing, all right, they passed a Stamp Act. Now a stamp in this day and today, a stamp is really only used for postal purposes, but during this time, pretty much everything required a stamp, as it says right there. All right. Any type of official document, a newspaper, a license, a card, you had to get a stamp for it. So now you have a Stamp Act, which is more of a tax. It's going to cost more money for those stamps, which is going to hurt the colonists' pocketbook. And if you know from the famous movie Friday, playing my money is like what? It's like playing with my emotions, right? All right. So that's the way people think. You start playing with my money, and you're playing with my emotions. So the colonists are getting angry. Um, the next thing, Quartering Act. Okay, the Quartering Act. What that did. Remember, the British had to keep a presence in the colonies after the French and Indian War. One, they had to keep a presence there because they wanted to protect their land from the Native Americans. All right. They also wanted to protect their land they have won from the French going back and getting that land again. So, what do they do? Well, you have to keep a military presence there. So they say, well, we don't want to, build a bunch of barracks for these our soldiers. We're just going to have the colonists build the barracks and supply living space for our soldiers. Um, and I'm just going to tell you, from me, my experience from being overseas in another country. Anytime there is a foreign force in a country, okay, in this case, America wasn't a country, but the colonies, but the British were foreign to them, there's going to be resentment towards that foreign force, all right? So, for instance, I asked one of the local people who spoke English when I was in Iraq, I said, well, look, why do you guys hate us so much? He said, we don't hate you. We hate you because you're here. Which kind of made a little bit of sense to me. Is wait, they don't. It's nothing like personal. They just don't want us to be here. All right, that's the way some of these colonists felt towards the the British soldiers that were over there. And now, not only that, we got to provide them with food and housing too. Okay, no, I don't want to do that. That's what these colonists are thinking. So the Quartering Act. Now, I want you to think when look at some of these acts, and when we get to the drafting of the Constitution, a lot of the Constitution, those first 10 amendments known as the Bill of Rights, are a direct reaction to these acts pressed upon the colonists. For instance, the Quartering Act correlates almost directly with the Third Amendment, where you don't have to. The Third Amendment says you don't have to house foreign troops. You don't have to house soldiers, all right, in your house. Well, that's a reflection of the Quartering Act. So you have the Stamp Act, Quartering Act. Now the resistance is building. Particularly, there's a show about this. I don't know if any of y'all have seen it. Some of my students have watched it. I've seen parts of it. It's called the Sons of Liberty, which is basically a secret organization that arose to kind of start a rebellion, all right, or an effort against the British authority. So it's led by one Samuel Adams, all right, a cousin of John Adams. John Adams played a role in it as well, but mostly Sam Adams was the main leader in this organization, Sons of Liberty. So think of this rebellion as it's beginning, and really throughout the whole course of it, it's really centered in the beginning in Boston. All right. So if you look, I relate a lot of things to sports. The sports team today, the football team that's based near Boston or in Massachusetts, it's called what? The New England Patriots. All right. They get that name, that nickname, from the Sons of Liberty, or the fact that the rebellion kind of began and was based in Boston. Now, eventually, the political part will move to Philadelphia, but at the beginning, the revolution kind of starts in Boston, or Massachusetts, the colony of Massachusetts. The idea of no taxation without representation. All right, that's important. You've probably heard of it before. So the colonists did not have representation in the English Parliament. The idea is, well, they can't tax us if we don't have any type of representation in Parliament. We don't have a voice, so why can they tax us? Now, later, as we look at more constitutional amendments, and once you start studying the history of the United States, that kind of goes along with African Americans and other people being disenfranchised from the ability to vote, yet they're having to pay taxes and serve in the army and all these other things. All right, so that's something we'll get to later. So the colonists start to they organize protest and boycott, which we're going to look at a couple of specific ones here in a second. The resistance is beginning. All right, remember it's in Boston, where most of this is beginning. So another act, the Townshend Act. All right, the Townshend Acts was more taxes placed on imports. So things that are imported into the Boston Harbor or into the American colonies were taxed. All right, so in a sense, a lot of times it made the colonists have to buy British goods. And what you're going to see with this is, because all these imports are being taxed, a lot of colonists, particularly one John Hancock, you probably heard of him, first man to sign the Declaration of Independence, they turn to smuggling. All right, turn to smuggling things in, and John Hancock became the richest man in the colonies because he was an expert at smuggling things in. But anyways, that's kind of a sidebar. So the British, in response to these protests and boycotts, well, we're going to send more troops. We're going to send more force. That really kind of made the colonists even more agitated towards the British. In 1770 here, it's a big event. Now, this is 5 years before the Revolution, but it's important. So, known as the Boston Massacre, the colonists are protesting the British occupation, the British being there. So apparently one of the colonists throws something, snowball or something, at the British army, But the next thing is how a lot of events happen in history. You don't really know what sparks it, but all of a sudden, boom! You got now the British are firing, they're shooting their guns, they're killing colonists. The first colonist is killed. Well, 5 colonists are killed. The first one is actually an African American. Well, it wasn't not African American because America wasn't it wasn't America yet, but it was a runaway slave. All right, a black colonist named Crispus Attucks. So they go to trial. Most of the soldiers are found not guilty. This is important, not necessarily on the test, but it's interesting. I always thought it was interesting. Is one John Adams here, the second president of the United States. He actually represented the soldiers who were firing on the colonists, but the soldiers were found not. John Adams, he was a lawyer, but the soldiers were found not guilty. So this kind of further agitated the colonists. A big thing, it says there at the bottom, is not really a massacre. All right, 5 colonists are killed, but it's kind of the first piece of propaganda, meaning this painting, it was engraving, is what it was hatched up by Paul Revere. All right, if you look at the engraving, what does it look like? It looks like a massacre. All right, the British faces, for one, they're all pointed directly at the colonists. The British faces are more angular, more aggressive, pointed and pointy. They're the ones firing at the colonists. The colonists are the ones, lying on the ground. Their faces are kind of rounded, which they don't seem as aggressive. And so this engraving is distributed throughout the colonies, further leading more to that resentment towards Great Britain. Next event, you have the Boston Tea Party. All right, the British, again, they said, look, you can only buy British tea. This is all we're going to allow you to do is buy our tea. Well, the colonists said, hold on, I want to be able to buy other tea, have some competing prices. So what do? They dress up as Native Americans and take a lot of the British tea and throw it into the Boston Harbor. So it's cited as a means of protest during the time, and so still it wasn't necessarily a violent protest, right? Because I guess maybe it was. In fact, they burned the ships, but they weren't killing anyone. But it's cited as an early example of protest. This is one of the last ones we're going to look at is the Intolerable Acts, or the British called it the Coercive Acts. All right. So with this, basic civil rights are suspended, including a right to a trial by jury. If you look at the Bill of Rights that is in there, it guarantees, one of the first 10 amendments of the United States, it guarantees you to have a speedy and fair trial by a jury of your peers. And so that could be seen as a reaction to one of these intolerable acts. Housing troops in people's home. That's another that has to do with the Third Amendment being passed, which you as an American citizen, you don't have to house a military person in your home. All right. And so these are different ones. The colonists called it the Intolerable Acts. The British called it the Coercive Acts. And here's just a picture. So this is the assignment. The assignment I put on Canvas there is it basically gives you a list of events or acts, and you have to fill out the chart. Put the year it was, so when it was, and basically what it was. So some of the answers you can get filling out the charts, you can get from my lecture here. Some you can get from the PowerPoint that I post. Others you may have to look up, like some for one specific year. Some of these you may have to look up. All right, so remember, just email me if you have any questions. All right, so for the rest of the week, I'll probably post a video and tomorrow, and then maybe another assignment. Well, I will post another assignment. Probably 2 more assignments this week, and then next week we're going to do the test. All right. Um, so please, I'll email out the schedule for the rest of the week later today. I'll also put it on the class calendar in Canvas. So please email me if you have any questions.